CEO came home and saw a homeless woman with triplets sleeping in his luxury bed. Richard Parker was exhausted after 3 months traveling through Europe, closing deals for his tech company. When he opened the door to his penthouse in the upscale Upper East Side neighborhood of New York City, he froze completely at the sight of something he never imagined he'd find. A woman in torn clothes and messy hair was lying on his king-size bed, holding 3 little girls who appeared to be triplets. The children were fast asleep, curled up under the Italian silk duvet that had cost a fortune. The woman had deep, dark circles under her eyes and looked like she hadn't showered in days. Richard thought about calling building security immediately, but something in the woman's exhausted face made him hesitate. How on earth had she gotten into his penthouse on the 15th floor? The building had a modern security system and 24-hour doorman service. One of the girls coughed softly, the sound echoing in the silent apartment. Richard noticed all 3 children were too pale and thin. Their bare little feet were dirty, and the clothes they wore were old and patched. The woman startled awake at the sound of the door closing. Her eyes widened in terror when she saw Richard standing at the bedroom entrance. She quickly stood up, pulling the 3 girls behind her in a protective stance. "Please, sir, don't call anyone," she whispered in a shaky voice, trying not to wake the children. "We didn't do anything wrong, I swear. We just needed a place to sleep." Richard studied the woman more closely. There was something familiar about her face, but he couldn't place it. She looked to be in her early 30s, but hardship had aged her. "How did you get in here?" Richard asked in a controlled voice, still processing the surreal situation. "I used to work in this building, sir. About 6 years ago. I was a janitor on the night shift," she answered, wringing her hands nervously. "I remembered the parking garage code. I thought maybe it hadn't changed." The 3 girls clung tighter to their mother, frightened by the man's voice. Richard noticed they were identical, all with light brown hair and brown eyes, and couldn't be older than 5. "What's your name?" Richard asked, trying to stay calm. "Melissa Wilson, sir. I used to clean the hallways and empty apartments. You must have seen me a few times, but I don't expect you'd remember." Richard tried to recall but couldn't. In recent years, he'd spent so much time traveling that he barely noticed the building staff. His social life revolved around business meetings and corporate events. "And these girls are your daughters?" Melissa nodded, pulling the triplets even closer. One of them, the skinniest, started whimpering softly. "We're hungry, Mum," the child murmured. "Shh, Emma, not now." Melissa tried to soothe her, clearly embarrassed. Richard felt a pang in his chest at the desperation of the situation. The children were visibly malnourished and cold, even wrapped in his expensive duvet. "How long has it been since you ate?" Melissa lowered her eyes, ashamed. "Since the day before yesterday, sir. I got some old bread from the bakery, but the girls ate it all." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Richard felt the weight of guilt. His fridge was full of expensive food he barely touched, while these children were starving in his own bed. "Why did you choose my apartment specifically?" Melissa hesitated before answering, avoiding his gaze. "It's the only one I knew the old code for, sir, and..." She stopped, as if about to say something important, but changed her mind. "It's a big apartment. I thought maybe you wouldn't even notice if we stayed just one night." "One night? How long have you been here?" 3 days, sir," admitted Melissa, shrinking back as if expecting a scolding. "This morning one of the new doormen said you'd be back today. I was going to leave before you arrived, but Olivia got sick and couldn't wake up." Richard looked at the child Melissa pointed to. The girl was even paler than the other 2, breathing with difficulty. "She needs a doctor," Richard said, instinctively stepping closer. "No, sir, please," Melissa blocked his path. "If we take her to the hospital, they'll ask questions. They might separate us." "Separate how?" "Child Protective Services, sir. If they find out we have nowhere to live, they could take my daughters." Richard saw the terror in Melissa's eyes. It was the purest fear he had ever witnessed, the fear of a mother losing her children. "Listen, Melissa, I'll be honest with you. This situation is very strange for me, but I won't call anyone just yet. First, let's get these children some food, then we'll talk." Melissa began to cry with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Parker. You've always been different from the other residents? You know me? I do, sir. You always greeted the staff. I remember once you helped me when I dropped a bucket in the elevator. Richard didn't recall it specifically, but it was possible. He had always tried to treat the staff well, unlike other residents who ignored them completely. He went to the kitchen and made simple sandwiches. The three girls ate as if it were the best meal of their lives, which broke Richard's heart. Between bites, they whispered to each other, always watching him with curiosity mixed with fear. "What are their names?" Richard asked. "Emma, Olivia, and Ava," Melissa replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "They're triplets, born premature 6 weeks early." "And their father?" Melissa's expression closed off immediately. "We're not in contact with him, sir." Richard sensed there was more to the story. The way Melissa avoided his gaze and the tension in her voice suggested the father was a complicated subject. After the children finished eating, Richard insisted Olivia be examined. He called a private doctor he knew and requested an urgent house call. "Dr. Smith, I need you to come to my apartment. It's an emergency with a child." The doctor arrived in less than an hour. William Smith had been Richard's friend for years and never asked unnecessary questions about urgent requests. After examining Olivia, the doctor took Richard aside. "She has early-stage pneumonia, Richard. She needs antibiotics immediately, and all three are malnourished. How long has it been since they've seen a doctor?" "I don't know. They're not my daughters," Richard explained briefly. "Doctor." Smith raised his eyebrows but professionally refrained from commenting. "I'll prescribe the medication. They need proper nutrition and follow-up care. This situation could get serious fast." After the doctor left, Richard sat with Melissa in the living room. The girls were asleep again, this time on the couch with clean blankets. "Melissa, I need to understand your situation better. How did you end up on the streets with 3 little girls?" Melissa took a deep breath, as if preparing to share something painful. "I worked here in the building until 6 years ago, Mr. Parker. It was a good job. I lived in a studio in Astoria and was managing financially." "What happened?" "I got pregnant. When my belly started showing, the supervisor, Patricia Thompson, said I was disrupting the work. She made up a story that I was stealing cleaning supplies to sell." Richard vaguely remembered the supervisor. A tall woman, always in a bad mood, who treated employees with sharpness. "Were you stealing?" "Never, Mr. Richard. I've never stolen anything in my life." But the supervisor's word carried more weight than mine. I was let go without any rights. They said if I tried to sue, they'd make up more things against me. "And the father of the children?" Melissa closed her eyes as if the question caused physical pain. He disappeared when he found out they were triplets, said he wouldn't feed 3 mouths and that I should have been more careful." "Do you have family? Parents? Siblings?" "No, sir. I'm an orphan. Grew up in shelters until I was 18. The job here in the building was the first real opportunity I ever had." Richard felt a heavy weight in his chest. Melissa's story was one injustice after another. A hard-working woman, an orphan who got a decent job and was unfairly fired just when she needed stability the most. "How did you survive all these years?" "I took odd jobs wherever I could, cleaned houses, cared for the elderly, sold sweets on the street. But with 3 little babies, it was so hard. Often we'd go the whole day without eating so they could have milk." "And where did you live?" "In a back room at a boarding house in the Bronx. But 2 months ago, the owner said he was tearing the building down. Since then, we've been moving from shelter to shelter, sleeping in parks when there's no room." Richard was shocked. How could this happen in a city where he lived in a luxury penthouse? How had he never stopped to think that people were suffering like this so close to him? "Melissa, why didn't you seek help? Social organizations, churches?" "I did, Mr. Richard, but there are always more people in need than available spots. And I was afraid if they found out about our situation, they'd take my daughters. I'd rather struggle alone than risk that." Richard watched the 3 girls sleeping. Even in their worn clothes, with hunger written on their faces, there was something about them that moved him deeply. Maybe it was the innocence with which they slept, trusting their mother would protect them from everything. "Melissa, you can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, We'll figure out a more permanent solution. Are you sure, sir? We don't want to be a bother. I'm sure, but I want you to tell me everything. If we're going to fix this, I need to know all the details. Melissa nodded, relieved. For the first time in years, she wouldn't have to worry about where her daughters would sleep the next night. That night, Richard barely slept. He kept thinking about life's irony. He, who had spent the last years building a business empire, had never felt as useful as he did now, offering shelter to a family in need. The next morning, Richard woke to the sound of children's laughter coming from the kitchen. Downstairs, he found Melissa making breakfast, while the three girls explored the penthouse in awe. "Mom, look how many rooms this house has," exclaimed Emma, the most talkative of the three. "And there's a giant bathtub," added Ava, amazed. Olivia, still a bit weak but visibly better after taking the antibiotic, held her mother's hand. "Melissa, how are you feeling today?" Richard asked. "Better, Mr. Richard. I don't remember the last time I slept in a real bed." Richard noticed Melissa had washed her face and fixed her hair. Even in old clothes, she had a natural beauty that exhaustion had hidden. "Listen, Melissa, last night I kept thinking about your story. I want to look into what really happened when you were fired." Melissa looked worried. "Mr. Richard, that was 6 years ago. People probably don't even remember." Patricia Thompson still works in the building's administration. In fact, she's now the general manager. I'll talk to her today. Please, sir, don't mention you found me here. If she finds out, I won't mention it, but I want to understand what really happened. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That afternoon, Richard went down to speak with Patricia Thompson. He found her in her office in the administration, a small but tidy room in the building's basement. "Mr. Parker, what a surprise to see you here. We don't usually have direct contact with the owners," said Patricia, visibly nervous. "Patricia, I need to clarify something about a former employee, Melissa Wilson. Do you remember her?" Patricia's expression changed completely. She tensed up and began unnecessarily shuffling papers on her desk. "Melissa Wilson. Yes, I remember. Why do you ask about her?" "I'm conducting an internal audit of the past few years. I want to review some termination cases. What exactly happened to her?" "She was caught stealing cleaning supplies. She was fired for cause. It's all documented." "Can I see that documentation?" Patricia hesitated. "Of course, Mr. Parker. I'll look for it. But it was so many years ago. The files might not even be here anymore." Richard noticed Patricia's nervousness. His experience as a businessman had taught him to read people, and it was clear she was hiding something. "Patricia, was Melissa pregnant when she was fired?" "Yes, she was. But that had nothing to do with the termination. It was just a coincidence." "I see. And who witnessed this alleged theft?" "I did, Mr. Parker. That's why I made the decision to let her go immediately." Richard knew he was being lied to. The way Patricia avoided eye contact and gave evasive answers confirmed his suspicions. "Could you give me the details? What products were taken when it happened if there were cameras?" "Mr. Parker, forgive me, but why this sudden interest in an employee who was let go so long ago?" "Like I said, I'm conducting an audit. I need to ensure all procedures were followed correctly." Patricia stood up, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll look for the documentation and bring it to you tomorrow. I'll need to dig through the old files." Richard nodded, but he knew Patricia would use that time to fabricate a story or even falsify documents. When he returned home, he found Melissa playing with her daughters on the balcony. It was the first time he'd seen a genuine smile on her face. The girls ran around, enjoying the space they'd never had before. "How did your conversation go, Mr. Parker?" Melissa asked when the children went to the bathroom. "Interesting. Patricia got very nervous when I mentioned your name. She's hiding something." "Mr. Parker, I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. If finding out the truth complicates your life, it's better to let it go. Melissa, you were wronged unfairly. If this really happened, the person responsible must face the consequences." That night, Richard called his personal lawyer, Dr. Jeffrey Davis. "Jeffrey, I need to investigate a termination that happened 6 years ago in my building. I suspect it was based on false accusations. Richard, that's a long time. It'll be hard to find evidence. I know, but I want to try. It's a matter of justice. The next day, Patricia showed up at Richard's apartment with a folder in hand. Mr. Parker, I brought all the documentation on Melissa Wilson. Richard flipped through the papers. They were typed reports, seemingly old, detailing alleged thefts of cleaning supplies. Patricia, you said you personally witnessed the theft. Yes, sir. And these dates on the report are correct? Perfectly correct. Richard smiled to himself. Patricia had made a crucial mistake. One of the dates mentioned was a Sunday, a day when he knew the building had no cleaning service. Are you sure about these dates? Absolutely sure, Mr. Richard. Thank you, Patricia. After Patricia left, Richard checked his own records. He confirmed that on the Sunday mentioned in the report, the building had no staff due to electrical maintenance he himself had authorized. Patricia had made up random dates, probably hoping no one would check after so much time. Richard decided to dig deeper. He called some long-time residents and employees who still worked in the building. Mrs. Jenkins, the oldest doorman, was especially helpful. Mr. Richard, I remember Melissa well. She was a hard-working girl, always polite. I was surprised when I heard she'd been fired for theft. Why surprised? Because she was one of the most honest people I've ever seen. Once she found an expensive bracelet in the elevator and insisted on turning it in at the front desk so we could find the owner. And about Supervisor Patricia? Mrs. Jenkins looked around to make sure no one was listening. Mr. Richard, I don't like speaking ill of colleagues, but Patricia was always jealous of Melissa. They were the same age, but Melissa was more liked by the other employees and the residents. Professional jealousy. Not just that, sir. I remember Patricia used to say it wasn't fair for an orphan to have the luck of getting a good job, while she, who had family and an education, earned almost the same salary. Richard thanked Mrs. Jenkins and went home with more pieces of the puzzle. It was becoming clear that Melissa had been the victim of an injustice driven by personal envy. When he got home, he found Melissa helping the girls with an improvised school assignment. She'd found paper and pencils in the apartment and was teaching them to write their own names. Melissa, can I speak with you privately? They went to the balcony while the children kept drawing. I've discovered some things about your dismissal. I'm almost certain Patricia fabricated the accusations against you. Melissa let out a deep sigh. I knew it, Mr. Richard. I always knew she lied. But who would believe the word of an orphaned cleaner over a supervisor's? Why didn't you ever try to prove your innocence? How, sir? I was pregnant with triplets, with no money for a lawyer, no family to support me. It was her word against mine. Richard felt anger rising in his chest. Melissa had suffered for 6 years because of a lie motivated by envy. Melissa, I'm going to fix this injustice. Patricia will be fired, and you'll receive compensation for the lost years. Mr. Richard, I don't want your money. It's not my money, Melissa, it's what you're owed. You were wronged unfairly, and it happened in a company I manage. That night, Richard had a serious talk with himself. He was realizing that his life of luxury and isolation had made him oblivious to the suffering of people who lived very close to him. Melissa's story was a painful lesson about privilege and social responsibility. The next day, Richard scheduled a meeting with Patricia and the building manager. Patricia, after carefully reviewing the documentation about Melissa Wilson, I found some serious inconsistencies. Patricia paled. What kind of inconsistencies, Mr. Richard? The dates of the alleged thefts don't match the building's operational records. Specifically, you reported witnessing a theft on a Sunday when the building was closed for electrical maintenance. It must have been a typo. Patricia, I spoke with long-time employees. It's clear there was personal animosity between you two. You made up the accusations against Melissa out of jealousy, didn't you? The manager, Dr. Robert Johnson, watched the conversation with growing concern. These are very serious accusations, Richard. I have proof, Robert. Patricia, do you have any explanation? Patricia began to cry, realizing she was cornered. Mr. Parker, I was going through personal problems at the time. My husband had left me and I was depressed. When I saw that Melissa was pregnant and happy, I felt jealous. It was a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness that destroyed a woman's life and 3 innocent children. I know it was wrong. If I could go back, you can't go back, Patricia, but you can face the consequences of your actions. Richard turned to the building manager. Robert, I want Patricia fired immediately, and I want Melissa Wilson reinstated with all the rights she should have received over these 6 years. Richard, I don't know if that's possible. It is possible. I'll personally cover all legal costs if necessary, but this injustice will be corrected. Patricia was fired that same week. Melissa was officially reinstated and received compensation equivalent to 6 years of salary plus interest and adjustments. When Richard told Melissa the outcome, she cried for a full hour. Mr. Parker, I never imagined someone would fight for my justice like this. Melissa, you deserved so much more. Oh, I'm sorry it took this long for the truth to come out. But there was still another mystery puzzling Richard. During the days Melissa and her daughters had stayed in his home, he'd noticed some odd behaviors. The girls had habits and mannerisms that reminded him of himself as a child. Emma would bite her lip when concentrating, just like Richard used to. Ava would crack her knuckles when nervous, another tic he recognized. And Olivia had a birthmark on her neck almost identical to Richard's in the same spot. Richard began to suspect there was more to the story than Melissa had shared. One evening, he decided to address it directly. Melissa, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Mr. Parker. About the girl's father. You said he disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy, but some details don't add up. Melissa visibly tensed. What details, sir? The girls have very specific physical traits, and some habits that caught my attention. Mr. Parker, I don't understand where you're going with this. Melissa, I need to know the truth. The girl's father, do you know him personally? Melissa began to cry, confirming Richard's suspicions. Melissa, please tell me the truth. Who is their father? Between sobs, Melissa finally spoke. Mr. Parker, it's you. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The world seemed to stop around him. That's impossible, Melissa. I'd remember if we'd had a relationship. It wasn't a relationship, Mr. Parker. It was just one night 7 years ago. Richard tried to recall. 7 years ago, he'd been going through a rough patch. He'd ended a turbulent engagement and was drinking more than he should. Melissa, I need details. When and where did this happen? It was at the building's New Year's Eve party, sir. December, 7 years ago. You were very upset because you'd broken up with your fiancé. We talked a lot that night. You said you felt alone even with all your money. Richard began to remember vaguely. The building's New Year's Eve party. He'd drunk too much whiskey and stayed in the party hall until late. Melissa, were we together that night? Yes, Mr. Parker, it was just one night. The next day you didn't even look at me. I thought it meant nothing to you. And when did you find out about the pregnancy? A month later. They were triplets. I panicked. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. Every time I tried to approach you, you were busy or traveling. Why didn't you insist? Mr. Richard, I was a cleaning lady. You were a millionaire businessman. Who would believe the girls were yours? It would look like I was trying to pull a scam. Richard was in complete shock. 3 daughters. He had 3 daughters and never knew. Melissa, why didn't you tell me this when we met here at home? I was going to, sir, but I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Afraid you'd try to take the girls from me. Richard looked out the window where the 3 girls were playing on the balcony. His daughters. Triplets he never knew existed. Melissa, we'll do a paternity test. I need to be sure. I understand, Mr. Richard. The test was done the next day. Richard paid for it to be private and fast. The results came in 48 hours, 99.9% probability of paternity. Richard Parker was the father of Emma, Olivia, and Ava. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When he got the results, Richard locked himself in his office for hours, trying to process the information. He was a father. Not just that. He was the father of 3 beautiful, intelligent girls who had lived in poverty while he amassed millions without even knowing they existed. The guilt Richard felt was devastating. His daughters had gone hungry, endured the cold, lived in rundown shelters, while he dined alone at expensive restaurants. How was this possible? When he finally left the office, he found Melissa in the kitchen preparing the girls' dinner. She looked at him with hope and fear. "The results came in, didn't they?" Melissa asked, her voice trembling. "They did. They're my daughters." Melissa began to cry. "Mr. Richard, I swear I never wanted to use this against you. I just wanted to raise my girls with dignity." "Our girls, Melissa, they're our girls." Richard sat at the table, trying to gather his thoughts. "Melissa, I need to understand one thing. Why did you choose my apartment specifically to break into? Was it because you knew I was their father?" Melissa wiped her tears. "No, Mr. Richard. It really was because I knew the code, but also because sometimes I told them stories about the daddy they never knew. I described you without saying it was you." "What kind of stories?" "I told them their daddy was a good man who worked hard, who lived in a beautiful house with an ocean view. That one day when they were older, maybe they could meet him." Richard felt his heart break. Melissa had created a fantasy for their daughters, about a father who was actually living his life without even knowing they existed. "Do the girls know who I am?" "They don't, sir." "But Emma mentioned you furrow your brow just like she does. And Ava said you crack your knuckles the same way she does when she's nervous." Richard realized his daughters had instinctively recognized their shared genetic traits. "Melissa, how are we going to tell them?" "I don't know, Mr. Richard. They're too young to understand the whole situation." That night, Richard watched the girls as they slept. They were his daughters, flesh of his flesh, blood of his blood, and he had missed the first 6 years of their lives. Emma, the most talkative, slept hugging a stuffed bear Richard had bought her. Olivia, still recovering from pneumonia, breathed calmly with the help of a humidifier. Ava slept on her side, in the exact same position Richard slept in. The next day, Richard decided to talk to the girls gradually. "Girls, do you know why you're living here with me?" "Because we didn't have a home, and Uncle Richard is kind," Emma answered. "And would you like to keep living here?" "Forever?" Ava asked, her eyes shining. "Forever." "But Mum said we shouldn't be too much trouble," Olivia said worriedly. "You're not trouble at all. In fact, I'm really happy to have you here." Richard knelt to the girls' level. "Can I tell you a secret?" The 3 nodded eagerly. "I've always wanted daughters. Beautiful, smart daughters like you." "And why didn't you have daughters?" Emma asked. Richard looked at Melissa, who watched the conversation with tears in her eyes. "Because I didn't know I already had daughters. But now I do." "You have daughters, where are they?" Ava asked. Richard smiled, pointing at them. "They're right here in front of me. You're my daughters." There was a moment of silence as the girls processed this. "Are you our daddy?" Olivia whispered. "Yes, my dear, I'm your daddy." Emma was the first to react, jumping into Richard's arms. "I knew it. I knew you were special." Ava was more cautious. "But why weren't you with us before?" "Because I didn't know you existed, Ava. If I had, I would have been there from the very first day." Olivia stepped forward timidly. "Are you going to leave again?" "Never again, Olivia. Daddy will never leave you." All 3 girls hugged Richard at once, and he felt an emotion he'd never experienced before. Unconditional, pure, absolute love. Melissa watched the scene, crying with happiness. Her daughters finally had the father they'd always deserved. But not everything would be simple. In the days that followed, Richard realized being a father was a far greater challenge than running a multinational company. The girls carried trauma from their life on the streets. Emma had frequent nightmares about going hungry. Olivia was afraid Richard would disappear in the night, so she insisted on sleeping by his bedroom door. Ava hoarded food under her bed, a habit from when they'd starved. Melissa was struggling too. After years of fighting alone for survival, she found it hard to accept help or relax. "Melissa, you don't have to do all the housework. I can hire help." "Mr. Richard, I need to feel useful. If I don't do anything, I'll feel like I'm taking advantage." You're not taking advantage, Melissa. You're the mother of my daughters, and you deserve to be cared for too. Richard noticed Melissa still treated him with excessive formality, keeping an emotional distance despite being the mother of his children. One night he decided to address it. Melissa, you can stop calling me Mr. Richard. We're family now. It's hard for me, Mr. Richard. For years you were the untouchable millionaire boss. Now we're... What exactly? It was a fair question. What were they? Not a couple, but bound by their daughters. Not just acquaintances, but not close friends either. We're the girls' parents, Melissa, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. But things got more complicated when Richard's family and friends learned about the girls. His older brother, Michael Parker, showed up at the apartment the following week. Richard, I need to understand this story about you suddenly having 3 daughters. Richard introduced Michael to the girls and gave him the short version. Brother, are you sure you're not being played? A woman shows up with 3 kids after 6 years and claims they're yours. Michael, I took a paternity test. They're my daughters. Fine, I accept that. But what about their mother? What's her angle? How much is she asking for? Richard bristled at the implication. Melissa isn't asking for anything, Michael. She didn't even want to accept financial help at first. Richard, you're too naive. A poor woman with 3 daughters meets a rich father. It's every opportunist's dream. Michael, Melissa is an honest woman who was wronged unfairly. She's not an opportunist. If you say so. But hire a good legal advisor. Protect your assets. The conversation with Michael left Richard unsettled. Would people always suspect Melissa's intentions? The distrust grew when Richard's other friends heard the story. Malicious comments began circulating in New York City's business circles. I heard Richard Parker got hooked by a scammer with 3 daughters. He's always been too naive about these things. I bet in a few months she'll be asking for $1 million settlement. These comments reached Melissa through Mrs. Jenkins, the doorman. Mrs. Wilson, people are saying you're a gold digger, that you're only with Mr. Parker for the money. Melissa was devastated. It was exactly what she had always feared, that people would think she was taking advantage of the situation. That night she talked to Richard. Richard, maybe it's best if the girls and I leave. Why, Melissa? People are talking, saying I'm after your money, that I'm using you. And you care what people say. Yes, I do. I don't want your daughters growing up hearing their mother is a user. Richard was furious. Melissa had suffered a terrible injustice, raised 3 daughters alone, and now had to endure cruel judgments. Melissa, you're not going anywhere, and I'll make it very clear to everyone that any nasty comments about you won't be tolerated. The following week, Richard hosted a dinner at his apartment, inviting family, close friends, and some business associates. He wanted to officially introduce Melissa and the girls as his family. I'd like you all to meet Melissa Wilson and my daughters, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, Richard announced during dinner. The girls, dressed in new but simple clothes, greeted the guests politely. Melissa, though nervous, carried herself with dignity. Throughout the evening, Richard watched people's reactions. Some guests were genuinely warm, especially the older women who adored the girls. Others remained coldly polite, clearly judging the situation. Dr. Robert Johnson, the building manager, was among the friendliest. Richard, your daughters are beautiful, and Melissa seems like a very devoted woman. Thank you, Robert. They're the best thing that's ever happened to me. But not everyone shared that opinion. Richard overheard whispered remarks that made him furious. 3 daughters at once. What a convenient coincidence. She knew just when to show up. Richard's always been too sentimental about these social causes. After dinner, when everyone had left, Richard found Melissa crying in the kitchen. Melissa, what's wrong? I heard the comments, Richard. People think I'm an opportunist, that I planned all this. Melissa, what matters isn't what people think. It's what's true. But it will affect your daughters. They'll grow up hearing these things. Richard hugged Melissa, feeling her pain as his own. Our daughters will grow up knowing they're loved, and that their mother is a strong woman who fought through every hardship to protect them. But things got worse when Michael showed up again, this time with a proposal. Richard, I spoke with our lawyer. He suggests you make a settlement with Melissa. Give her and the girls a good sum, but keep legal custody of the children. Michael, are you suggesting I take the girls from their mother? I'm suggesting you protect your interests. The girls will have a better life with you, access to the best education, healthcare, opportunities. And Melissa? Melissa gets enough money to live comfortably. Everyone wins. Richard Parker was outraged. Michael, Melissa isn't some surrogate who served her purpose and can now be dismissed. She's the mother of my daughters and a woman I respect. Richard, you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Think about what's best for the children. What's best for the children is having both parents present. I won't tear this family apart. Michael left frustrated, but he planted seeds of doubt in Richard's mind. Was he being rational? From a legal and financial standpoint, wouldn't it make more sense for him to have custody of the girls? This doubt grew when Richard noticed some practical challenges. The girls needed to be enrolled in school, required regular medical checkups, and updated documents. The entire process was complicated by their unstable living situation and Melissa's lack of updated paperwork. One morning, while trying to sort out school matters for the girls, Richard had a difficult conversation with the principal of the private school he'd chosen. Mr. Parker, I need to better understand the children's family situation to process their enrollment correctly. They're my daughters. I want to enroll them here. I see. And their mother? Melissa Wilson. She's also their legal guardian. But are you married? Do you officially live together? Richard realized the problem. Officially, he and Melissa had no legal ties beyond their daughters. She wasn't his wife, not his registered employee. She had no official status in his life. We're not married, but we live together and raise our daughters together. The principal looked uncomfortable. Mr. Parker, our school has certain expectations regarding students' family structures. We need to ensure the situation is stable. Richard understood the subtext. The school didn't want to associate with what they saw as an irregular or scandalous arrangement. The situation is stable. We're a family. Of course, Mr. Parker. We'll proceed with enrollment, but we'll need clear documentation regarding legal responsibility for the children. On his way home, Richard grew thoughtful. Would the girls' lives be complicated because of their unconventional family situation? This worry deepened when Emma came home crying after her first day of school. Daddy, a girl in my class said my mom is a beggar. Richard felt anger rise. Sweetheart, who said that? Ava. She said she heard her mom talking about it. Richard realized the cruel gossip from adults was reaching the children and hurting his daughters. That night, he had a serious talk with Melissa. Melissa, we need to make a decision about our situation. What kind of decision? The girls are suffering because of the talk about our family. The school asked uncomfortable questions. My brother suggested I seek legal custody. Melissa paled. You want to take my daughters from me? No, Melissa, I'd never do that, but maybe we need to formalize our situation somehow. How do you mean? Richard took a deep breath. What he was about to propose would change everything. Melissa, would you marry me? The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa stared at him as if she hadn't understood the question. Are you proposing marriage? I'm proposing a practical solution. If we marry, our family will have legal status. The girls will have social stability. The cruel gossip will stop. Melissa stood up, clearly upset. Richard, are you proposing a marriage of convenience? I'm proposing a marriage that solves our practical problems. What about love? What about feelings? Richard hesitated. It was a question he'd been avoiding. His feelings for Melissa were complex. He admired her strength, her dedication to her daughters, her dignity in the face of suffering. But was that love? Melissa, we get along well. We respect each other. We love our daughters. Could that be the foundation for a solid marriage? Richard, I won't marry for convenience. I've suffered too much in life to accept a relationship without love. Melissa went upstairs to her room, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at home grew tense. Melissa avoided deep conversations with Richard, limiting herself to what was necessary to care for the girls. The children, sensitive to the mood, became quieter and more worried. "Daddy, why is Mommy sad?" Olivia asked one evening. "She's not sad, sweetheart. She's just thinking about some important things. Is it because we're bothering her?" "Never, Olivia. You could never be a bother. Daddy and Mommy are just working through some grown-up matters." But Richard realized the situation was affecting the whole family. He needed to find a solution. A week later, Melissa made a decision that surprised Richard. "Richard, the girls and I are moving out." "Where to?" "I rented a small apartment in Chelsea. With the settlement money, I can cover a few months' rent." "Melissa, you don't have to do this. This is the girls' home now." "Richard, I can't keep living in this undefined situation. The girls need stability, not two adults who don't know what kind of relationship they have." "What about me? I'm their father too. You can visit them whenever you want. You can spend weekends, holidays. But they need a home where they truly belong, not a place where their mother is tolerated out of convenience." Richard felt panic. The thought of losing daily life with his daughters was unbearable. "Melissa, let's talk about this. Don't make a hasty decision." "It's not hasty, Richard. I've thought a lot. This is for the best." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The house already felt empty just imagining Melissa and the girls leaving. He had discovered what it meant to be a father, and now he might lose it all because he couldn't handle his own feelings. The next morning, he found the girls packing with Melissa. "Girls, do you want to move?" "No, Daddy," Emma answered honestly. "We like living here with you." "Then why are you packing?" "Because Mommy said we have to go," Ava explained. Richard knelt to their level. "Girls, how would you feel if we all kept living together forever?" "Like a real family?" Olivia asked. "Like a real family." "But Daddy and Mommy don't love each other," Emma said with the brutal honesty of children. Richard looked at Melissa, who watched the conversation with tearful eyes. "Who said Daddy and Mommy don't love each other?" "We can tell, Daddy. You don't kiss, you don't hug like parents on TV." Richard realized his daughters were more observant than he'd thought. They'd noticed the lack of affection between their parents. "Girls, sometimes grown-up love is different from what you see on TV. Quieter, but no less real." Melissa stared at him in surprise. It was the first time Richard had spoken about love so directly. "Richard, don't say things you don't mean," Melissa whispered. "And how do you know what I mean?" That afternoon, after the girls went to play in the building's common area, Richard and Melissa had the most honest conversation of their lives. "Melissa, I need to confess something." "What?" "Ever since you came into my life, everything changed. It's not just because of the girls, it's because of you too." "Richard, you don't have to say this out of pity or obligation." "It's not pity, Melissa, it's admiration. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. You raised 3 daughters alone, faced hardship, injustice, prejudice, and never lost your dignity. That's not love, Richard, it's respect. And when respect mixes with affection, with the desire to protect, with the feeling that my life became complete when you all arrived," Melissa began to cry. "Richard, I don't want to be just another responsibility for you. You've already been more than generous taking us in. You're not a responsibility, Melissa. You're the woman I fell in love with without even realizing it. Don't say that, just to convince me to stay." Richard moved closer to Melissa, and for the first time since they'd reunited, gently touched her face. "Melissa, I love you. I love your strength, your dedication, your kindness. I love the way you care for our daughters. I love how you made me realize I could be more than just an empty businessman. Richard, marry me not out of convenience, but because I want to build a real life with you. Because I want to be your husband, not just the father of your daughters." Melissa looked into Richard's eyes for a long moment, searching for any sign of deceit or manipulation, but all she saw was sincerity and vulnerability. "I love you too, Richard," she finally whispered. "I've loved you since that night 7 years ago, but I was afraid it was just gratitude. It's not gratitude, Melissa. It's real love." They kissed for the first time as adults, fully aware of their feelings. It was a kiss filled with emotion, years of pain and hope for happiness. The girls, who had just returned from the playground, caught their parents kissing in the living room. "Yay! Now we're a real family!" Emma shouted, running to hug them both. "Daddy and Mommy love each other," Ava cheered. "We won't have to pack our bags anymore," Olivia said, relieved. The official proposal happened a week later, during a simple dinner at home. Richard knelt before Melissa with a modest but meaningful ring. "Melissa Wilson, will you marry me and make official the family fate had already created?" "Yes, Richard Parker. Yes, because I love you and because I want to build our future together." The girls clapped excitedly, finally seeing their parents as a true couple. The wedding was simple, held at the courthouse with only the girls as witnesses. Melissa wore a plain white dress and Richard a navy blue suit. The triplets wore matching yellow dresses and carried the rings. The reception was small, held in the building's event room with a few co-workers, dear neighbors and close friends. Mrs. Jenkins, the doorman, cried with emotion when she saw Melissa in her wedding dress. "Mrs. Melissa, you deserve all the happiness in the world," she said. Michael, Richard's brother, attended the wedding and, after getting to know Melissa better, completely changed his opinion of her. "Richard, I'm sorry for my earlier comments. Melissa is an exceptional woman. You were lucky to find her." "Actually, she found me," Richard joked. During the reception, Olivia gave a short speech that moved everyone. "Today is the happiest day of my life because I finally have a father and mother who love each other. Thank you, Daddy Richard, for taking care of us, and thank you, Mommy, for never giving up on us." The honeymoon was simple, a week at an inn in the Hamptons, just the 5 of them. The girls played on the beach while Richard and Melissa finally had time to talk as a couple. "Richard, sometimes I still can't believe this is real," Melissa said as they walked along the sand. "It's real, my love. We're a real family now." "The girls are so happy. Emma told me she dreamed of a father as loving as you. And I dreamed of a family that would make me feel complete. You're everything I never knew I needed." When they returned to New York, life settled into a happy routine. Richard adjusted his work schedule to spend more time with the family. Melissa went back to school, taking business courses to help Richard with the company's social projects. The girls adjusted well to school and made friends. The mean comments decreased drastically after the marriage, especially when other mothers got to know Melissa better and recognized her genuine kindness. A year after the wedding, the family received a surprise. Melissa was pregnant again. "Richard, I'm expecting another baby," Melissa announced nervously. "Really?" Richard was overjoyed. "Another one of ours. Are you happy?" "Absolutely thrilled. Our girls will have a little brother or sister." The triplets were excited by the news. Emma immediately declared herself the responsible big sister. Ava wanted to know if she could choose the baby's name. Olivia worried if there would still be enough lap space for everyone. "There will be room for everyone, my dear," Richard assured, hugging all the girls. The baby was born healthy, a boy named Ethan. The girls became devoted big sisters, always helping to care for their little brother. 2 years later, Richard's company had become a benchmark for social responsibility, inspired by his own family's story. They created a program to support single mothers in vulnerable situations, offering work, temporary housing, and professional training. Melissa graduated with a degree in business administration and took over coordinating the company's social program. Her personal experience made her a natural leader in helping other women facing situations like hers. "Melissa, you've transformed not just my life, but the lives of hundreds of families through this program," Richard said during the project's 2nd anniversary event. "We transformed it together, Richard. I could never have done it alone." The triplets, now 8 years old, were bright and affectionate girls. Emma wanted to be a doctor to help sick children. Ava dreamed of becoming a teacher. Olivia, the most sensitive, wanted to work with families like theirs in the social program. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after that first meeting in the penthouse, the family gathered on the balcony watching the sunset over the Upper East Side. "Daddy, do you remember when we slept in your bed for the first time?" Emma asked. "I do, sweetheart. That was the day that changed my life forever. I was so scared, Olivia admitted. I thought you'd send us away. And I thought you'd call the police, Ava laughed. I'd never do that, girls. You were exactly what I needed. I just didn't know it yet. Melissa, with Ethan sleeping in her arms, watched the conversation with a smile. Richard, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd reacted differently that night. There was no other way to react, Melissa. Fate brought us together for a reason. Mom, tell us the story of how you met again, Emma requested. It was a story the girls never tired of hearing. How Daddy and Mommy met at a party. How the girls grew in Mommy's belly without Daddy knowing. And how they reunited on a cold night when they had nowhere to sleep. And then Daddy woke up and saw 3 beautiful girls sleeping in his bed, Melissa continued. And found out he had a family without even knowing, Ava added. And they lived happily ever after, Olivia finished. Richard held his family close, looking at the life he'd built. 6 years ago, he was a wealthy but lonely man, focused only on work. Now he was a father of 4, husband to an extraordinary woman, and a businessman with a social purpose. You know what I find most amazing about this story? Richard said. What, Daddy? The girls chimed. It's that you didn't break into my house that night. You came home. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this heartwarming story. Do you believe love can completely transform a person's life? Leave your honest opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will touch your heart.